The shuttle bay doors hissed open to reveal a crowd of armed guards and nervous officials. Ambassador Rilia stepped onto the polished metal floor of the Galactic Council station with her usual grace, her gray scales catching the harsh overhead lights. Behind her walked Owen Brooks, hands clasped loosely in front of him, eyes scanning the reception committee with professional detachment. Ambassador Rilia of the Heltari Concordance, announced a crystalline being whose voice chimed like bells. We welcome you to these critical peace negotiations. Your bodyguard must submit to security protocols immediately. Owen nodded once and moved toward the scanning arch without being prompted. The guards tensed visibly as he approached, their weapons shifting slightly in their grips. The human passed through the detector arrays while technicians studied their readouts with furrowed brows and confused expressions. No weapons detected, one technician reported, sounding almost disappointed. No armor, no concealed devices, no biological enhancements. A Morphean guard with insectoid features and gleaming black carapace leaned toward his companion. Why would a diplomat bring a Deathworlder with no weapons? What protection can he possibly offer? His fellow guard chittered in amusement. Perhaps humans are not as dangerous as the rumors suggest. Look at him, he appears completely ordinary. Rilia heard the whispered comments but maintained her dignified silence as station officials led them through multiple security checkpoints. Each corridor brought them deeper into the heart of the station, where the final peace talks would take place. 40 years of war had brought the three factions to this moment, and everyone knew this was the last opportunity to prevent total annihilation. The conference chamber stretched out before them like an arena. A circular table dominated the center with sections clearly marked for each delegation. Around the perimeter, bodyguards from all three factions stood at attention, bristling with visible weaponry and barely contained hostility. Owen took his position behind Rilia's assigned seat and stood perfectly still, watching everything and reacting to nothing. Commander Vrel arrived next, his Morphean military decorations covering most of his chest plate. 4 heavily armed soldiers flanked him, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small building. Vrel's compound eyes swept across the room and paused briefly on Owen before dismissing him entirely. I see the Heltari have brought a pet from the frontier worlds, Vrel announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Tell me, Ambassador, does your human perform tricks as well as standing quietly? Rilia's expression remained neutral. Owen is here to ensure my safety, Commander, nothing more and nothing less. Safety, Vrel repeated with obvious mockery. Perhaps you should have brought someone capable of providing it. The Gren Alliance delegation entered through the opposite entrance, led by Representative Hollies, a being whose features reminded Owen of terrestrial amphibians. Her guards carried energy pikes that hummed with barely restrained power. She glanced at the other delegations with obvious distrust before taking her assigned position. Council Overseer Danthai materialized at the head of the table, his crystalline body refracting light in rainbow patterns. We gather here today because billions of lives depend on what happens in this chamber. The war for Axis 7 has consumed 3 generations and destroyed countless worlds. This must end. It will end, Commander Vrel declared sharply, when the Morphean Collective's rightful claim to Axis 7 is recognized by all parties. We discovered that planet first, and we will not surrender what is ours. Representative Holly slammed her webbed hand on the table. The Gren Alliance has colonized Axis 7 for over 200 years. Your so-called discovery was nothing but a survey probe that spent 3 days in orbit. We have cities there, families there, history there. Ancient history means nothing, Rilia interjected calmly. The Heltari Concordance has documented evidence that Axis 7 was originally seeded with life by our ancestors 12,000 years ago. If we are discussing rightful claims, ours extends further back than either of yours. The chamber erupted into shouted arguments and accusations. Guards from all 3 factions gripped their weapons tighter while Overseer Danthai attempted futilely to restore order. Owen remained motionless throughout the chaos, his expression unchanged, his breathing steady and measured. 3 hours passed with no progress. Each delegation presented historical documents, survey records, and legal arguments that contradicted everything the others claimed. The bodyguards grew restless, their muscles tensing with anticipation of violence that seemed increasingly inevitable. Finally, Commander Vrel stood abruptly. "This is pointless. We waste time with words while our fleets position themselves for the final confrontation. The Morphean Collective will not compromise on what belongs to us by right of strength." He signaled to his guards, who immediately moved toward the exit. Representative Hollies rose as well, her own delegation preparing to depart. Rilia closed her eyes briefly, decades of diplomatic effort crumbling in front of her. "Ambassador," Owen said quietly, his first words since entering the chamber. Rilia looked up at him with exhausted eyes. "Yes, Owen." "May I address the room?" Every being in the chamber turned to stare at the human bodyguard who had stood silent as a statue for hours. Commander Vrel paused at the doorway, his mandibles clicking with irritation. "The human wants to speak," Vrel announced mockingly. "Perhaps he wishes to beg for peace on behalf of his employer. Very well, let us hear what wisdom a primitive Deathworlder can offer to civilized beings." Owen stepped forward from behind Rilia's chair, his movements unhurried and deliberate. "I'm not a diplomat," he began in a voice that carried clearly across the chamber without being raised. "I'm just a soldier who's seen war. If you'll permit me, I'd like to tell you a story about Earth." Council Overseer Danthai's crystalline form pulsed with curiosity. "You may proceed, human. We will hear what you have to say." Owen nodded his thanks and began to speak. Owen's voice remained steady as he addressed the assembled delegates. There were 3 nations on Earth that fought over a river valley for 87 years. The valley was fertile, the water was pure, and each nation believed they had the rightful claim to it. One said their ancestors settled there first, another claimed they had developed the land, the third insisted that ancient treaties gave them ownership. Commander Vrel crossed his arms. "A touching story, but we did not come here for history lessons about primitive planetary conflicts." "Please let him continue," Rilia said softly, something in Owen's tone making her curious about where this was leading. Owen nodded his appreciation. "The First Nation said their people had lived along that river for 500 years. They had built cities there, raised families there, buried their dead in that soil." The Second Nation pointed to their agricultural innovations that made the valley produce 3 times as much food. They argued that development created ownership. The Third Nation produced documents older than both, showing that their empire once controlled the entire region. Representative Hollies leaned forward slightly. "Which nation had the legitimate claim?" "All of them," Owen replied simply. "And none of them. Every argument was valid from their perspective. Every claim was supported by history and precedent. Every nation genuinely believed they were fighting for justice." He paused, letting that settle over the room. The war consumed 3 generations. Children grew up knowing only conflict, learning to hate the enemy before they learned to read. Farms became battlefields, cities became rubble. The river that everyone fought to control became poisoned by the weapons they used against each other. "But surely one side won," Commander Vrel interjected. "Surely the strongest nation claimed victory and established their dominance." Owen's expression darkened. The strongest nation did win eventually. They had better weapons, more resources, more determination to see it through to the bitter end. They drove out the other 2 nations, planted their flag on every inch of that valley, and declared total victory. "Then the conflict was resolved," Vrel stated with satisfaction. "The valley was dead," Owen countered quietly. "The soil was poisoned, the water was toxic, the infrastructure was destroyed. The winning nation had spent so much on the war that they couldn't afford to rebuild. They controlled a wasteland that produced nothing and supported no one. Victory tasted like ash in their mouths." The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the bodyguards had stopped their restless movements to listen. "What happened to the survivors?" Representative Hollies asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Owen met her eyes. They scattered to other regions, carrying their grief and their anger with them. 30 years later, the children of those three nations met at a memorial service. They stood together in the ruins of what their parents had fought over, and they wept. Not because they were enemies, but because they finally understood what they had lost. They wept together, Rilia repeated softly. They realized that the valley could have supported all three nations if they had been willing to share it, Owen continued. The resources were sufficient, the land was vast enough, the water was abundant. But their grandparents chose exclusivity over cooperation, chose pride over pragmatism, chose war over compromise. By the time that generation learned the lesson, there was nothing left to share except regret. Commander Vrel's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among his species. You suggest we should simply surrender our rightful claims because some Earth nations destroyed themselves through stubbornness. I'm not suggesting anything, Owen replied calmly. I'm just sharing what I've seen. Earth has thousands of such stories, Commander. We've fought over rivers, mountains, deserts, islands, and ideologies. We've justified every war with history, honor, and righteousness. And every single time, the survivors looked back and wondered why those things seemed worth dying for. A young Morphean officer standing behind Commander Vrel spoke up hesitantly. How long did it take for that valley to recover? Owen turned to face the junior officer. Parts of it are still dead 500 years later. Some poisons don't fade with time. Some damage cannot be undone. The nations that fought over it eventually rebuilt elsewhere and prospered, but that valley remains a monument to what they lost. You speak as if humans have learned from these mistakes, Representative Hollies observed. Yet your species has a reputation for violence and warfare. We have, Owen admitted without defensiveness. Humans are very good at finding reasons to fight. We're very good at convincing ourselves that this time is different, that our cause is just, that our enemy deserves destruction. We're equally good at forgetting those reasons once the fighting stops and we're left counting our dead. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each delegate. I'm not here to tell you that humans are wiser than other species. We're not. We're just stubborn enough to keep making the same mistakes until the lesson finally sticks. Earth unified not because we evolved beyond conflict, but because we destroyed so much that we had no choice but to cooperate or perish entirely. Rilia spoke into the heavy silence that followed. Owen, what would you do if you were in our position? Owen considered the question carefully. I'd ask myself what I want my legacy to be. Commander Vrel, do you want to be remembered as the leader who won? Axis 7, or the one who saved Morphean children from having to fight for it? Representative Hollies, will future Gren historians praise you for holding firm on your claims, or for having the courage to build something new? Ambassador Rilia, will the Heltari Concordance honor you for defending ancient rights, or for choosing present lives over past glories? Commander Vrel's compound eyes fixed on Owen with new intensity. You ask dangerous questions, human. Someone has to, Owen replied simply. Because in 3 generations, your descendants will stand in the ruins of Axis 7 asking the same questions you're avoiding now. They'll wonder why their grandparents chose destruction over compromise. They'll weep together over what was lost. And they'll wish someone had asked these dangerous questions before it was too late. Commander Vrel remained standing at the doorway, his posture rigid but his retreat halted. The chamber felt different now, charged with something that hadn't existed before. Possibility, perhaps, or maybe just the first crack in decades of hardened positions. You speak of children and future generations, Vrel said slowly. Do you have offspring, human? No, Owen answered honestly. But I've held friends as they died asking me to tell their children why their sacrifice mattered. I never found adequate words for those conversations. Vrel's mandibles clicked softly. I have 2 offspring in military training. They are proud to serve, eager to prove themselves in battle. It is our way. It was our way too, Owen replied. Until we realized that pride and eagerness aren't worth much to the dead. They can't feel honored by memorials or satisfied by victory celebrations. Only the living carry those burdens. Representative Holly straightened in her seat. My people have sacrificed greatly for this cause. Entire colony worlds have gone without adequate resources because we've diverted everything to the war effort. Children on our outer worlds know hunger because we've prioritized weapons over food shipments. How do I tell them that their suffering was for nothing? You don't, Owen said gently. You tell them their suffering bought wisdom. You tell them that their sacrifice gave you the perspective to choose a different path. You tell them that remembering the cost is how you honor what they endured. Rilia placed both hands flat on the table. I must admit something that may cost me my position. The Heltari Concordance's claim to Axis 7 is based on evidence that is 12,000 years old. We have no living connection to that world, no cultural memory of it, no practical need for it. We fight for it because we've always fought for it, because admitting our claim is outdated would mean admitting that thousands died for an abstraction. The admission sent ripples through the chamber. Several of the Heltari guards behind Rilia shifted uncomfortably, but none contradicted their ambassador. That took courage, Representative Hollies acknowledged. Perhaps more courage than continuing to fight. Very well, I will match your honesty. The Gren Alliance claims 200 years of colonization, but our actual population on Axis 7 never exceeded 40,000. We maintained our presence there primarily to prevent others from claiming it. The world has become more valuable as a bargaining chip than as an actual colony. Commander Vrel walked slowly back to the table, his guards following with uncertain expressions. The Morphean Collective has the resources to take Axis 7 by force. Our military superiority is undeniable. But I begin to wonder if military superiority alone constitutes a valid claim to territory. He sat down heavily. My offspring are 15 and 17 cycles old. They train every day with weapons, practice combat maneuvers, study battle tactics. They dream of earning glory in this conflict. I have encouraged these dreams because I believed they were honorable. Now I wonder what kind of legacy I'm creating. Owen remained standing, his presence somehow commanding attention despite his lack of formal authority. Commander, do you love your offspring? Vrel's compound eyes focused sharply on the human. That is an intrusive question. It's the only question that matters, Owen countered calmly. If you love them, then you already know what you should do. You're just fighting with yourself about whether you have the strength to do it. And what is it you think I should do? Vrel challenged. Choose them over pride, Owen said simply. Choose their lives over ancient claims. Choose a future where they might live in peace over a present where they die for honor. It's not complicated, Commander. It's just difficult. The young Morphean officer who had spoken earlier stepped forward. Commander Vrel, permission to speak freely. Vrel gestured for him to continue. I've studied the tactical projections for a full-scale assault on Axis 7, the officer said carefully. Even with our military advantages, casualty estimates range from 30 to 50,000 Morphean soldiers. The Gren and Heltari forces would suffer similar losses. That's not counting civilian casualties or the collateral damage to the planet itself. I find myself wondering if those deaths serve the collective or merely our pride. Commander Vrel stared at his subordinate for a long moment. You've been thinking these thoughts for some time, haven't you, Lieutenant? Yes, Commander, but I lacked the courage to voice them until today. Rilia leaned forward. Perhaps we all lacked the courage until today. Perhaps that's why we needed someone from outside our conflict to hold up a mirror. Owen shows us what we cannot see while trapped in our own perspectives. What do you propose, Ambassador? Representative Hollies asked. We cannot simply ignore 40 years of conflict and pretend we've solved nothing. Rilia took a deep breath. Joint administration of Axis 7. All three factions would have equal rights to the planet's resources, equal representation in its governance, equal responsibility for its development. The world would belong to all of us or to none of us. That's radical, Hollies responded, but her tone carried interest rather than rejection. My government would never approve such an arrangement without extensive negotiation and safeguards. Then we negotiate, Rilia replied. We establish safeguards, create oversight committees, develop dispute resolution mechanisms. We do the hard work of building something new instead of destroying each other over something old. Commander Vrel drummed his claws on the table rhythmically. The Morphean High Command would view this as weakness. They would say I betrayed our warriors who died for total victory. Or you could tell them you ensured their grandchildren never have to die for the same cause, Owen suggested. Leadership isn't about making easy choices, Commander. It's about making necessary ones. Alarms suddenly shrieked throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the chamber in crimson illumination. A mechanical voice announced coldly, "Unidentified vessels entering system. Multiple contacts, heavily armed, refusing communication protocols. All personnel to defensive stations." Station Commander Voss burst into the chamber. "Delegates, we have a situation. Sensors show 15 vessels of mixed origin approaching at attack speed. They're broadcasting a message declaring that if you won't fight for your people's honor, they will. Extremists from all three of your factions have coordinated an assault. Estimated time to weapons range, 3 minutes." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates shouted accusations at each other while their bodyguards raised weapons defensively. Commander Vrel immediately accessed his communication device, barking orders in rapid clicks and whistles. Representative Hollies did the same, her webbed fingers moving frantically across holographic controls. Owen moved to the tactical display that dominated one wall of the chamber and studied it with focused intensity. The approaching vessels showed clear identification signatures. 5 Morphean cruisers, 5 Gren destroyers, and 5 Heltari frigates, all moving in precise formation toward the station. "They're coordinating with each other," Owen observed quietly. "Your extremists have achieved something you couldn't. They're working together." Commander Vrel finished his communication and turned to face the chamber. "The attacking Morphean vessels broke away from our main fleet 6 hours ago. We assumed they were conducting routine patrol maneuvers. My commanders report that attempts to contact them have been ignored." "Same with the Gren ships," Representative Hollies added, her voice tight with stress. "They're part of a radical faction that opposed any peace negotiations. We thought we had neutralized their influence." Rilia accessed her own fleet status. "The Heltari vessels are registered to military units that have repeatedly refused orders to stand down. We have been tracking them, but they maintained communications protocols until 1 hour ago." Station Commander Voss pulled up defensive projections. "This station's shields can withstand approximately 90 seconds of concentrated fire from that fleet. After that, we're defenseless. Evacuation is impossible. There's not enough time to reach the shuttles and clear minimum safe distance. If those ships attack, everyone in this chamber dies." "How long until they reach weapons range?" Rilia asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be comforting. 2 minutes 40 seconds, Voss replied grimly. Owen continued studying the tactical display. "Commander Voss, your communication array can broadcast on all military frequencies simultaneously, correct?" "Yes, but what good will talking do?" Voss responded. "These are extremists. They've already decided that peace means betrayal." "They decided that before hearing what was actually discussed here," Owen countered. "They think we failed to defend our respective positions. They don't know we were actually making progress." Commander Vrel's mandibles clicked sharply. "You suggest we broadcast to them, tell them what exactly, that we've decided to surrender our claims and share the prize. That will only enrage them further." "Not if you tell them yourselves," Owen said, turning to face all 3 delegates. "Not if you announce that peace terms have been reached and order them to stand down." "Peace terms haven't been reached," Representative Hollies protested. "We've barely begun discussing the details of joint administration." "Then reach them now," Owen stated flatly. "You have 2 minutes to agree on basic principles or everyone here dies, extremists included. Those ships are manned by people who believe they're defending their civilization's honor. Show them that honor includes following lawful orders from legitimate authority. Rilia stood. He's right. We don't need a complete treaty, just a framework. Commander Vrel, will the Morphean Collective accept joint administration with equal resource rights? Vrel hesitated only a moment. Yes. Representative Hollies, will the Gren Alliance accept the same terms? Hollies gripped the edge of the table. My government will have me executed for this decision. Your government can execute a living ambassador or bury a dead one, Owen said quietly. But they can't execute you twice, and at least this way you'll be alive to defend your choice. Hollies closed her eyes briefly. Yes, the Gren Alliance accepts. Then we have basic terms, Rilia declared. Commander Voss, open all channels, broadcast to those ships and to all fleet commands in the system. Voss moved to the communications station. All channels open. You're broadcasting to approximately 300 vessels plus the 15 extremist ships. Everyone in this sector is listening. 2 minutes 10 seconds to weapons range, a technician announced. Rilia stepped forward. This is Ambassador Rilia of the Heltari Concordance. I speak with full diplomatic authority, the Heltari. Delegation formally accepts the terms of joint administration for Axis 7. All territorial claims are subordinated to shared governance and equal resource allocation. I call upon all Heltari vessels to acknowledge these terms and stand down from hostile actions. Commander Vrel moved beside her. This is Commander Vrel of the Morphean Collective Military Command. I confirm acceptance of joint administration terms on behalf of the Morphean delegation. All Morphean vessels are hereby ordered to power down weapons and comply with established protocols. Any ship that disobeys this direct command will be classified as mutinous and face appropriate consequences. Representative Hollies joined them. This is Representative Hollies of the Gren Alliance. Despite the political costs, I affirm acceptance of the joint administration framework. The Gren Alliance recognizes that peace serves our people better than continued conflict. All Gren vessels will comply with these terms immediately. 1 minute 30 seconds to weapons range, the technician reported. Extremist fleet maintaining attack vector, no change in status. Owen stepped forward. May I? Rilia gestured for him to continue. This is Owen Brooks, Human Diplomatic Security, Owen began, his voice carrying clearly across all frequencies. I'm not a politician or a military commander. I'm just someone who's watched this negotiation unfold over the past few hours. I want to tell you what I saw. 1 minute 15 seconds. I saw 3 enemies sit down expecting to fail, Owen continued. I saw them argue, defend their positions, and refuse to budge. Then something changed. They started asking different questions. They stopped asking who deserves Axis 7 and started asking what they want their legacy to be. They stopped thinking about the past and started thinking about the future. 1 minute to weapons range. Extremist fleet weapons systems powering up. The delegates behind me just risked everything to choose peace, Owen said. They know this decision might end their careers, might make them targets, might cost them everything they've worked for. They chose it anyway because they decided that their children's futures matter more than their own pride. 45 seconds. You're flying toward this station believing you're defending honor, Owen stated. But honor isn't about never surrendering, it's about knowing when to stop. Fighting, real courage isn't dying for a cause. It's living with the consequences of choosing peace. Those delegates showed that courage. Now I'm asking if you can do the same. 30 seconds to weapons range. Extremist fleet maintaining attack formation. The chamber held its collective breath. Owen stood before the communications array, having said everything he could think to say. Either his words would reach them or they wouldn't. In 30 seconds, they would all know which. 20 seconds. The tactical display showed weapons locks established on the station. Every being in the chamber understood that death was moments away. Some closed their eyes, others gripped their seats, but Owen simply stood watching the screen with calm acceptance. 15 seconds. Commander Vrel's compound eyes were fixed on the Morphean vessels, silently willing his people to obey his orders. Representative Hollies had both hands pressed against the table, as if trying to hold reality steady through force of will. 10 seconds. Rilia reached out and gently touched Owen's shoulder. No words passed between them, but the gesture carried gratitude for trying, acknowledgement that some things couldn't be changed by words alone. 5 seconds. Alarms reached a fever pitch as automated defense systems calculated impact trajectories and began composing damage reports for strikes that hadn't happened yet. 3 seconds. One of the Morphean cruisers suddenly broke formation, its weapons powered down in a sequence visible on the tactical display. Then a second vessel followed, then a third. Multiple contacts disengaging weapon systems, the technician reported with disbelief coloring every word. Gren destroyers following suit, Heltari frigates standing down. All 15 extremist vessels have ceased attack protocols. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and relieved laughter. Several beings openly wept. Commander Vrel steadied himself against the table as if his legs had momentarily forgotten their function. A communication request came through from the lead Morphean cruiser. Commander Voss accepted it, and a face appeared on the main screen. A scarred veteran whose compound eyes showed the weight of too many battles. "This is Captain Dren of the Morphean vessel Relentless Pride," the officer stated formally. "I came here today prepared to die defending what I believed was Morphean honor. I've listened to your broadcast and to the humans' words. I realize now that honor isn't found in dying for old causes, but in living for new possibilities. The Relentless Pride and its accompanying vessels request permission to withdraw peacefully and return to Fleet Command." Commander Vrel stepped forward. "Permission granted, Captain Dren. Your decision today saved countless lives. That is true honor." Similar messages came from the Gren and Heltari extremist vessels, each captain expressing variations of the same realization. The war they thought they were fighting had already ended in the chamber behind them. They were simply the last to know. Station Commander Voss verified that all weapons were safely powered down before turning to the delegates. "I've been managing this station for 12 years. I've seen 17 peace conferences fail in this very chamber. I honestly believed this would be the 18th. Instead, I just witnessed a 40-year war end in approximately 3 minutes." "The war didn't end in 3 minutes," Rilia corrected gently. "It ended when we stopped asking who was right and started asking what was worth dying for. The 3 minutes were just when everyone else realized we had changed the question." Over the following hours, emergency communications brought representatives from all 3 governments rushing to the station. Some came to congratulate, others to protest, most simply to verify that what they'd heard was actually true. By the end of the day, preliminary frameworks had been established for joint administration of Axis 7. Owen returned to his position behind Rilia's chair. His moment of prominence passed, but delegates from all 3 factions kept approaching him, asking questions, seeking his perspective on their own conflicts and challenges. A young Morphean officer, the same one who had spoken up during the negotiations, approached Owen during a break. "Human, how did you know your words would reach the extremists? How did you know they would stand down?" Owen considered the question. "I didn't know. I just knew that people who truly want a fight don't hesitate. The fact that those ships maintained formation for hours instead of attacking immediately told me they wanted a reason to stop. They just needed someone to give them permission to make a different choice." 3 months later, Owen stood on the observation deck of a transport vessel watching Axis 7 rotate slowly. Below, the planet's surface now hosted joint development projects, with Morphean, Gren, and Heltari workers laboring side by side. Construction crews were building new facilities designed to house mixed populations. Children from all 3 species attended newly established integrated schools. Rilia joined him at the viewport. The Galactic Council has formally requested your presence at 14 other peace negotiations. Apparently word has spread about the human who ended a 40-year war with a story about a river valley. I didn't end anything, Owen replied, his eyes still on the planet. Commander Vrel, Representative Hollies, and you did the hard part. All I did was ask questions. Questions that nobody else thought to ask, Rilia noted. Questions that cut through 40 years of justifications and excuses to reach the truth underneath. That's a rare gift, Owen. He shook his head slightly. It's not a gift, it's just experience. Humans have fought so many wars that we've gotten good at recognizing the patterns. We know what it looks like when people are fighting because they've forgotten how to stop. We know because we've been those people too many times to count. Will you accept the Council's requests? Rilia asked. Some of them, Owen admitted. But I'm not a professional peacemaker. I'm a bodyguard who got lucky with the right words at the right time. Next time might be different. Next time they might not listen. And if they don't listen, Owen turned to face her. Then they'll learn the same way Earth did, through loss and regret and the bitter wisdom that comes from destroying what you claim to value. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be survived. Far below, on the surface of Axis 7, a Morphean child and a Gren child played together in a park that had been a battlefield just months before. They laughed at something, their joy carrying across species barriers with the ease that only children possess. Maybe that's the real victory, Rilia observed quietly. Not that we stopped fighting, but that we created a future where the next generation won't understand why we fought in the first place. Owen smiled slightly. That's not just victory, that's hope, and hope is what happens when you choose life over pride, future over past, and courage over fear. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the planet that had nearly destroyed 3 civilizations became instead a symbol of what could be built when enemies chose to become partners. Somewhere in the chamber where it all began, a memorial was being constructed, not to celebrate victory, but to remember that peace sometimes requires more bravery than war. And on that memorial, among the names of delegates and commanders, was a simple line. A human asked the right questions.